Idag ska jag träffa Soetkin Verhaegen som är forskare i statsvetenskap. Jag ska fråga henne om hur opinionsundersökningar funkar och vad de kan berätta. So, by start, what is an election poll?
An election poll is actually a type of survey where people, before the elections, are asked, imagine that it's elections today, who would you vote for?
But can they tell us who will win the election then?
No. Election polls cannot predict the future. I think no one can predict the future, so also election polls cannot do that. But they do give us some information because they give us an estimations about approximately how popular each party is at a certain point in time, and that point in time is the day when they ask it in the survey.
So why are election polls only an estimation and not very precise then?
Well, if you would want to be 100% sure about how many votes each party would get, if it would be elections today, for instance, you would have to ask every person who has the right to vote in Sweden. So at this point it's about 7 million people, so I think you can imagine that it's rather hard to ask 7 million people today. It would actually mean to organize elections already today, who they would vote for. So what they actually do is they ask about 1,000 people, who would you vote for should it be elections today? And then it is assumed that the distribution, so the popularity of each party within this group of 1,000 people who actually got the question, is similar as among these 7 million people who would vote in Sweden. But as you can imagine, many things can go wrong. If these 1,000 people are, for instance, too often highly educated compared to the Swedish population, or if there is not 50% men and not 50% women, this group of 1,000 people will look different than the actual group of Swedish voters. So that will mean that also their vote choices will probably be different, and therefore it is an estimation, it is an informed guess about how popular every party would be at the time when the election poll takes place. And actually there is a second thing why it's just an estimation. Because you might imagine if someone comes to you or if someone calls you on the phone, "Hi Malte, who would you vote for if it was elections today?" You might think, okay, maybe I should say something that the person wants to hear that I tell them. So you could have reasons not to be entirely honest in who you would vote for. So on election day it's different. You go in the voting booth, it's all private, it's all secret, you choose who you want to vote for, and you can say whatever you want. You don't have to be concerned about not pleasing someone. So it might be that people who have a more extreme opinion or who think that they have an opinion that the interviewer doesn't like will actually lie in the poll, and therefore the results will be more incorrect than if you would have real elections.
So why can we only know about that specific day the poll is has taken place? Why can't we know about the election then?
Well, that's a good question. Now, the reason is between the day when the poll takes place, which might be days or weeks or even months before the actual election, between that moment and the actual election, people have a lot of time to change their mind. So on the one hand, many people actually only decide just on the day of the elections who they will actually vote for. So if you ask it to them months ahead, actually they didn't decide yet. Also, as there is a lot of time, there is enough time for parties to have a good campaign, which might make you change your mind and suddenly support that party instead of what you thought first and what you mentioned in the poll. But also a scandal could come out about the party. And if that party was the ones you said in the poll that you would support it, you might withdraw your support from that party for that reason. And even more, election polls themselves can influence how people will vote on the election day. So that's something very important to take in mind about these polls. Because imagine you wanted to vote for a certain party on the day of the election poll. But then you read that actually another party is way more popular than the party you thought about voting for. So you might start thinking, if many people think that's a good party, it might be true. I will also vote for that party. or that party gets the status of expected to be the winner and you want to be part of the winners, right? So you might change your mind to vote for that party. And the opposite could happen if the party that you supported actually got a very bad rating in the polls, for instance.
And there must be good polls and bad polls. How is a good poll executed then?
Yeah. To begin with, a good poll is a poll where a sufficient amount of people is asked about their opinion about which party they would vote for. Imagine that you would ask your classmates, 20, 30 people, that will impossibly reflect what 7 million Swedish voters would actually do on election day. So usually around 1,000 people are asked what party they would vote for. Then on the other hand, asking your classmates would be a bad reason for a second reason actually. Because you're all a similar age, you also all have similar interests because you study similar things in school, so you are very much alike. While the Swedish population is way more diverse. So as I mentioned before, you have the different characteristics in the Swedish population, like distribution between men and women, between people of different education levels, people who have different jobs, people who have a different family situation. You would want these 1,000 people to be very similar to those 7 million people that would actually vote. And then finally, I also mentioned to you before, well, you might be asked a question by a certain person in real life. Who would you vote for if it would be elections today? Imagine that this person doesn't really look neutral. Imagine that this person is wearing a badge of a certain political party. You might think, this person would really like me if I would say that I would support his or her party. Or the person might ask a question in a not neutral way. For instance, in an election poll, often many different questions are asked, not just which party would you vote for. So imagine that they first ask you 5 different questions about issues that have to do with the environment or climate change. You might start thinking about these issues and think, oh, actually, these issues are important. And then you're maybe more likely to say that you would vote for the Green Party, for instance, which really campaigns on these issues. So it is really important that the right people are asked, enough people are asked, and the question is asked in a neutral way.
Nästa gång jag ser en opinionsundersökning så kommer jag att tänka på det som Soetkin har tagit upp. Och jag hoppas att även du kommer göra det.